Welcome to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. The official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association. As we celebrate 75 years of DVC's impact on education, careers, and community, we're honored to share the incredible journeys of alumni who've transformed their time on our vibrant campus into meaningful careers, community contributions, and personal success. Each Tuesday, we spotlight DVC alumni, from first-generation graduates to entrepreneurs, educators, and leaders who share the triumphs, challenges, and pivotal moments that shaped their lives. And on Thursdays, it's Resource Thursday. We dive into the programs, departments, and services that make DVC the supportive, dynamic community it is, exploring how they serve students and how you can connect with them. Whether you're a current student, recent graduate, or longtime alum, join us as we honor DVC's legacy and discover how our past continues to inspire the future. Thank you for being part of this journey. Be sure to tune in, subscribe, and celebrate with us. DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next. And now, join our host, Alumni Manager, Charlie Daly.
And we are live, so why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ava Roberts-Stewart. I'm a previous alumni of Diablo Valley College. I graduated about a year ago.
Oh, okay. Pretty recent. Well, cool. So let's start with kind of like where'd you grow up and kind of how your journey getting here.
Yeah, so I grew up mostly in Danville, so pretty close, always been in the Bay Area. Really loved growing up in that tight-knit community, but it's been super fun exploring new places, especially because I go to school in Oakland now. It's a nursing college for the Bachelor's of Science of Nursing.
That's right. That's right.
So I currently go to Samuel Merritt University, and Oakland's just a very fun place, like a center of a lot.
So one of the things, so Danville's a great community, and I love Pleasant Hill. I raised all my kids here, and the thing I'm amazed at is to get like I'll just call it flavor and color. You got to go over the hill because here is pretty, it's pretty, the restaurants are kind of all the same, and and there's the number of chains, and they all kind of look and act the same. Then you get into Oakland, and it's just Berkeley and all those places. It's just, to me, it's amazing. Like the food scene and just the everything scene is just, it's so dynamic and exciting. So
a total melting pot of people. Yeah.
It is. So you went to San Ramon Valley High.
Correct.
Did you have a good time there?
I did. I really enjoyed the community. I mean, going to school in Danville, it was definitely had its own challenges, of course, So just expanding my way of just communicating with people, especially in learning, like, how do you apply yourself for nursing as a field, and just getting to know like all different backgrounds and like how does how we grow up influence the way we think.
Mm-hmm. So had you always wanted to be a nurse, or it was just one of those things that one day you woke up at 3 years old and went, I want to be a nurse?
I would say the very first career path that I originally thought of was to be a veterinarian.
Okay.
And then I saw the amount of schooling needed, and I was like, maybe not.
Yeah.
So I grew up with always around the hospital, whether it was me in the hospital or my grandparents. So it really was almost a calming environment for me and something familiar. And I saw how many people impacted everyone like around me, let alone myself. And I said, I want to give back just like that. I want to serve people with compassionate care in whatever way I can. Because I knew the lens of a patient. Mm-hmm. So that's important to me to have that like informed care.
Yeah, and it sounds like you kind of had that coming up fairly early in your what do I want to be when I grow up? Mm-hmm. Because when you're 6, it's like I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman, I want to be a fill in the blank, and then later on you develop other things. So you ended up, so you went from San Ramon Valley High to DVC, or was there a stop in between?
It was straight from Samuel Valley to
Okay.
DVC. I actually attended DVC as well as going to high school.
Oh,
I was
okay.
in a program called College Connect. So during my junior year, I started progressing through college credits. And by the time I had graduated from high school, I had a full year of undergrad under my belt. So I just did one more year, and then I finally had my associates of allied health.
Wow. Okay. So, excuse me. So you're going along. You get here to DVC. Now, did you start at the San Ramon campus or here at Pleasant Hill?
I started at San Ramon.
Okay.
And it was during the time of COVID.
So that doesn't count.
Lab,
It's just
lab was totally different. It was like this little take-home kit. And we're like, oh, okay, this is different. But how do we do this?
so COVID. It's one of those things where this is going to be, because it's like, for instance, like my parents talked about World War II, and their experience with it, and so it's like, times were different, the Great Depression. COVID's going to be our time to talk about that, what it was like to go to school then, what it was like to have meetings, what was that like trying to get through your labs and stuff? Describe that a little bit, because I'm amazed by anybody that got through anything during COVID.
Yeah, it was definitely... I can see how for so many people it was a real hard struggle. And I can imagine for the professors and the teachers at that time as well. Because it's like, how do you form everything you would do like hands-on in person, but then translate it to a computer screen? You can't really. So transferring that was definitely difficult. It required a lot more taking notes online, a lot more, okay, how do I stick this in my brain? Mm-hmm. But the professors I dealt with were all amazing. I totally enjoyed my time here at DVC.
Mm-hmm. Well, cool. So you got through that, and then talk a little bit about so what was your best memory here at DVC? What was that? Because I'm just thinking about, okay, COVID. It could have been, well, gee, I survived it. But was there like a standout thing or a professor or something like that?
I would have to say that the best experience that I had in terms of learning was just learning so many new things within microbiology. So I think it was the intro to microbiology, whatever was required for my prerequisites for nursing. But I had Dr. Karen Gard as my professor, and it was an amazing time being able to be hands-on and deal with formats like CRISPR or even like agar plates.
Okay.
That is just so cool.
Okay.
How many people can say they've done that?
Well, that's not me. So, I'm vaguely familiar with what CRISPR is, and it's just like, I'm like, well, that's way above. And I think it's amazing that we have it here at Diablo Valley College. It's an amazing technology.
Super high tech.
Yeah. So you went along, you're having a good time, and I know, and I guess we'll get into that part now, that there was some problems that you ran into while you were here. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I would say the whole story of why I'm here started about May of that final spring semester, about a year ago. I dealt with some events. They've seemed like isolated events where, I encountered this guy, he's like 9 years older than me. And he started doing some questionable things, a little bit of red flag. But I kind of pushed it off as, oh, he's just venting. There's nothing really behind this. It'll blow over within a week. But then it all escalated.
No. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I think it's important for more people to understand what I went through, just because I don't think it's talked about in the way that it should be. And so for everyone listening, I experienced stalking. So it was somebody that I trusted, okay? Someone I studied with. And during this time, I had this misconception of what a stalker looks like. Is it the person in a dark black hoodie, waiting in the corner in the shadows? Is that
peering
what it
through
looks
the
like?
bushes, or yeah.
Totally. And I think a lot of popular culture and media kind of wants to portray it in that manner. And I think that can be potentially harmful for a lot of victims who maybe don't realize that that's what they've experienced, just because it's called a phenomenon for a reason. It's so multifaceted. There's no way really to predict so many things within stalking, because every single event can be seen as isolated. But yet when you back up and you realize, oh, there was this form of surveillance. Oh, there was this sort of intimidation. We see a full picture of, oh my gosh, it wasn't just ranting and raving. It wasn't just, oh, I would like to monitor your social media and see what you're doing. No, it's stalking.
Okay. So it's not. I'm always amazed by this stuff because it's like my first thought is, and I've been around for a while, but it's like I also know that I have a lot of preconceived ideas, and most of it is because our brains tend to be very lazy, and so we tend to grab onto things. It's like we have this cartoon character of what a stalker looks like and what stalking is, and it's based on what we've seen in Hollywood and, the movies and TV shows and stuff like that. And instead, I mean, your point being is that ain't it. So walk us through some of the red flags. Cause I mean, you have a better understanding of this if you don't mind, let's walk us through some of the red flags that are like things that we can watch out for.
Yeah, of course. So I really enjoy, listening into this specific resource center. It's like a huge location specifically for stalking victims, but it's not just the victims themselves. It's more about how do we take a professional, how do we train them in order to recognize this is what's going on. And they have so many different infographics that really kind of walk through step by step. For campus professionals, for healthcare professionals, for law enforcement, what does stalking look like? And they're just doing really great work. And their company is called Stalking Resource Awareness Center. They're known as Spark.
Okay.
And so their infographic really details a really cool framework that when we don't know necessarily every single behavior that is related, because, it can look like harassment. Mm-hmm. It could look like many different things, like, oh, leaving flowers. That might be romantic. But is it? In the context,
yes.
Is it romantic?
Yes.
No. It's causing fear to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so they came up with this framework that they labeled SLY. It's surveillance as one portion, life invasion, intimidation, and interference. Okay. So a stalker is going to somehow encapsulate multiple versions of this kind of Venn diagram. So it could look like obsessive phone calls. It could look like 500 messages. I mean, it doesn't have to be numerical like that, but, did you ever find yourself in locations where they just happen to be? When, this is part of your daily routine, perhaps, and you've never seen them doing the same exact thing. So it's always unwanted contact.
So suddenly they're showing up at your Starbucks every time. And it's just, what are you doing here? Oh, I just happen to be in the neighborhood type of stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. They want to induce a fear in exactly the way that they know you will respond. Because, it doesn't have to be some random person. It could be someone you know. It could be someone you dated. Mm-hmm. It could be, a neighbor.
Well, my suspicion is that, and this is true of a lot of things, and by the way, this is probably one of the not as uplifting, but I think this is really important, which is why when you offered to come and do this, I was like, oh yes, let's do this. I think one of the struggles that we often have is that we always make an assumption in our heads, this is like the cartoon character, and that it'll be outside of our sphere. It'll be outside of our circle of friends or whatever. And I think a lot of things that happen, like people that take advantage of us and things of that nature, are often people that we know or we've met and we've become somewhat friendly with. So it's not like they're some complete stranger, fresh out of prison, Cape Fear type of thing going on. So yeah, walk us through a little bit more of that. I mean, some of the things that they have as resources. I mean, it sounds like this is an amazing resources, and we will link to this in the bottom of the in the show notes and also in the LinkedIn article. Mm-hmm.
So Spark currently works with a company called Equitas. They're kind of like brother-sister companies. And so that's like a team of attorneys and victim resource advocates. And they're really trying to work on how do we change policy or, with the rise of the Violence Against Women Act, how do we bring better recognition to what stalking means, whether it's within the context of intimate partner violence or domestic violence or anything outside of that. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship.
Yeah. So, talk a little bit more about, if you can, about kind of like what occurred as far as the nuts and bolts. You don't have to give names or anything like that, but just kind of like, and then how you felt as you were going through it. Because again, it's like one of those things. I think of it like, these are like, my wife sends me outside to go chase the raccoons off, and it's like, that's my job. It doesn't mean I'm not afraid, but it's like, I know at least the raccoons are over there. Well, I also have a little dog that'll chase them off too. But talk a little bit more about kind of like, as it progressed, what did it look like? I mean, how did you, what was the thing that made you recognize that there was something going on, and even if you didn't have a label for it?
Yeah. So, oh geez. It's such a loaded question. I didn't recognize anything was wrong until it was almost too late.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it wasn't actually me who recognized the behaviors. It was actually my manager from the place that I actually worked at.
Okay.
I had come to her about, some things, making me feel somewhat uneasy. I don't know, this person's just ranting, it'll all blow over. But just in case I don't sell enough, like we have to meet our quota, but just in case, you know why. And she goes, well, you know what you're dealing with, don't you? And I said, no, I do not know what's going on. Because what it had looked like was a friendly conversation turned into a spiral downwards of, hundreds of messages, taking my words from previous conversations, circling them, putting them, pasting them together, completely out of context, saying very demeaning things to myself about, and just overall harassing.
So they were messaging you directly with this stuff?
Correct. They were messaging me first on messages.
Okay.
And then once they figured out that I blocked them, they moved on to, I believe it was through Instagram.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then so that continued for I'd say a good 5 days or about a week, to where I started realizing maybe I should screenshot some stuff. Maybe I should perhaps write something down, because this is beyond normal. This is slightly concerning, but I didn't know what it was. And only when I only started to feel this feeling of what is known as reasonable fear was when my personal email in the inbox, I opened it up one time before work, and I see a message. And this email is paragraphs and paragraphs long. And the timestamp was 2:00 in the morning.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah. So where did he get my email? I have no idea.
I had a thought. So it's amazing. Excuse me. So I think a lot of folks, one of the struggles they have is because we always want to think the best of people. We always want to think, oh, it's just that we have this explanation. And there's a wonderful book called The Gift of Fear, and I can't remember the name of the author's name, but it talks about that. It's like, you sometimes got to just listen to your gut when you have that instinct of, and we're so quick, especially if, you grew up in Danville. It's not a very dramatic community, when the worst things going on are is like who drove the new car to school, that sort of thing. And so it's just that instinct isn't tuned up. And I think that in some ways it's almost like you said, it's like you didn't pay attention to it until it was almost too late. So what would be some of the things that you would suggest people that, listen to, or pay attention to? Because the other thing too is, how soon did you talk to somebody about this?
I talked to somebody. I believe the timeline looked like a messaging, Instagram, multiple forms of social media. All took place, ranting and raving, harassment, for about a week.
Oh, so this thing escalated really fast.
Correct.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, correct.
Well, again, my cartoon character of stalking is like it's months or years or whatever, but
no,
yeah.
It doesn't have to look like that. So it was all cyber stalking.
Wow. Okay.
As I now know what to name it, for a period of a week. And then I saw some concerning things on Instagram. Like, I know this person's first and last name. I know the name of their brother. We were just close friends like that. And I started seeing on Instagram all these different accounts. And I was like, wait a minute. That rings a bell. Where do I know that from? And it's all different combinations of first and last names, date of births. And then I see profile pictures on some, others with none. And so I started totaling them all up before I even, said anything to a friend.
Right.
And I noticed, I think at the time it was 11 accounts.
Oh, my goodness.
Associated with this person. And they try to disguise it as perhaps their brothers by formatting it in different ways. But I always knew the number, and the number correlated. It was something special to them. It was either their birthday or a special event or some part of their history. And then I saw one of the banner. It said new. After I had tried to block him on every single thing I could possibly do.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, if this person is trying to reach me, and they're obviously making new accounts, like, this raises some red flags.
More than a few, but yes.
And so that's when, my friend really helped encourage me to say, hey, something's going wrong here. And, my manager at the time said it was, like, important that she had to tell somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, I physically have to report this to the security team there and the HR. So we need to get a file started on this person just in case, worst comes to worst. Something happens or, they try to show up at work, just so we have some background on this person just in case they need police intervention.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the day prior to everything really exploding, I had just started a report. And I really said, this isn't necessary. I don't need to do any of this. Like, this person, I know this person. I trust this person. But, like, they're just going through a really random and weird time to where I feel uncomfortable. But does my discomfort allow for, further intervention? Does it allow for somebody to say, hey, we should put this on, police department's radar?
So your empathy was actually getting in the way a little bit.
Correct.
Yeah. Excuse me. And I get that. It's kind of like sometimes it's like, we'll talk ourselves into stuff because it's like we have a heart and we don't, especially if we know somebody, it's like, well, they're just going through a tough time. And, so I can certainly see that. I mean, I have to honestly say I've done that a million times. I didn't have a stalker, but a million times it's like somebody's behaving, let's just say, in a peculiar fashion. And it's like, well, and it's no. They need help. So, okay. So you got it on the police radar.
So it was filed as if it was ready to go.
Okay.
So I didn't know this at the time, but it wasn't a formal police report. It made me feel like it was. Nobody told me, on the contrary, that it wasn't. But I later learned this was something that went to human resources. This was in an HR. This wasn't even logged for police intervention. But the security team brought me in one of the following days. I believe it was the day after I noticed all the Instagram accounts. And they said, here's the person we know you're trying to talk about. What's their car? How do we best serve you? How do we help you to make you feel comfortable at work? And they said, if worst comes to worst, because I mentioned to my manager, I said, he's tried every single way that I could possibly think of to reach me. The worst thing I could think of was that he's going to come to work trying to find me. And I said, this is totally blown out of proportion to even say something like that. But something inside of me just stirred to say, that could be a possibility.
Yeah.
And so after they came and talked to me, the security team, it was about the start of the shift. So I'd probably say close to 10 o'clock. Doors are opening. Customers are coming in. It's just a normal day.
Yeah.
And then I received this super random text from this unknown number. And it really made me feel uneasy. Because I don't know who this is. But they just said, hello. So I said, this is something potentially from him.
Mm-hmm.
This is making me really uneasy. I think I have to tell one of my coworkers what's going on. And my coworker at the time, she used to be the manager of security, and so she knew what to do, how the security team runs. And so I felt like I could tell her, and then maybe about 2 other coworkers. I showed him his picture. I said, that's about all I want to say. And just left it at that. And that was about 1:00.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything just took a turn at about 7:00.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah, so I had just gone into the back stock where all of our supplies are, all of the clothing. And I told one coworker, hey, I'm going to be off the floor just for about 5 minutes. I'm going on break. I'll just be back in the stockroom. She was the only person that knew I was back there. And the next thing I know, the phone rings. My manager jumps out of her seat. She's like, oh no. I look to my left and I see the security guard busting through the door, running as fast as she can. She's completely out of breath.
He had showed up, didn't he?
Correct.
Oh man. Okay. Well, and to your credit, at this point, you told everybody, so that was a good start. So okay. So then what happens?
So the security guard comes and finds me in the back stock. She's running out there with my other coworker, trying to find, where did she say that she was? Is she in the back, like stocking some of the supplies? Is she in with a customer in a fitting room? Like, where is she? Like, she told me, but this is like all spur of the moment and like traumatizing for her, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So she's just trying to find me. And so thankfully my manager was back there with me, and she knew a little bit, but not the full picture of what I was going through, but she knew enough to say, hey, this is wrong. And so her getting the call, and I later find out it was security on the phone saying, he's on the cameras. We see him in the store. He's moving all the way from floor number 1, and their security team, like, milling about on the floor. And they had recognized a photo that I had given to them that exact morning.
Oh, wow.
And they said, wait a minute. He's asking for directions for the specific person. That's kind of odd. Oh, is he asking for the cafeteria? No. Is he asking for the lunchroom? No, he's asking for my department because he finally figured out which one it was. He went from the first floor asking all the different departments for my first and last name, trying to ask and see if I was on shift. And so he worked his way from the first floor, and he was on the second floor heading to the third.
Wow.
But he didn't realize there was an escalator there. So the security guard told him, the only way up is you can go through those elevators. And so she just booked it up the stairs as fast as she could.
Wow. So so at that point you're like going, oh my gosh. And, so did the police show up at that point, or did they?
No. So it was 7:00 when security got to me. He probably had been in the store for about 5 minutes. The whole time that he was there was probably less than 30 minutes in total. Mm-hmm. I was, put into the back stock, a certain area where I could lock a door, and just, stay out of sight. And so, no, the police were never called, because I think in order to trespass someone, you have to have a previous incident. So either they're causing a ruckus in the building and, it's affecting shoppers' experiences, or they've done something physical to where security says, oh, we need to get to the police right now.
Okay. So you're locked in the back, and this thing finally settles down, right? And he leaves.
Correct.
Okay. And at this point, I imagine your heart's in your throat. It's like, oh my goodness, now what?
Exactly. And I hadn't really told many people at all what I was experiencing. So it was more of, how do I deal this within myself? Like, I don't want to talk to people about it and burden them. I don't feel like I can impose myself on others to share this traumatic experience. So I felt very alone in what I had experienced, because I thought and saw it as I'm the only one that has experienced this. But of course, that's not true. Stalking is a gender-based violence that affects 1 in 3 women in their lifetime. Men, it's 1 in 6. So it's about 2 times higher chance for women to be affected.
Well, and I think that feeling of I'm alone, it's like anybody that's experiencing something that's outside of the edges, or like, because we all think of like, well, our lives are perfect, and then something starts happening, whether it's mental illness or, drug addiction, alcoholism, and domestic violence and stalking and all these things, because first of all, it's kind of like, well, my life isn't perfect, and that's kind of embarrassing. And then the other part of it too is it's just like, well, I must be the only one experiencing this, So you got through that. Walk us through like the last little bit of that.
Yes.
Because I want to get to this, the resources. How did you find that? How did you find this community? So
yeah. It was a lot of trial and error on myself. Like, nobody knew or knew of resources. Even searching a Google search online, if you type in stalking, I think you're met with a domestic violence website. Spark is up towards the top, and there's another company called Rain, and they deal more with sexual assault, but they deal with the whole entire aspect of abuse against women. So there's multi-topic awareness within that community. But yeah, trying to find resources was incredibly difficult, even to understand, how do I even tell a police officer about this?
Yep.
How are they not going to look at me crazy and say, oh, this is just a social media dispute?
Yeah.
There's nothing scary about it.
Well, and that's one of the things that I think is really troubling about things like this and other things like this, where, he didn't show up and beat you up, at which point you've got physical evidence that obviously there's a problem. But it's like trying to cut it off way before it gets to that point. And so, yeah, it's like, how do you find those resources? And obviously you were able to, but it probably took a lot of determination on your part.
Yes. I feel like for as often as we know it occurs in terms of research that we currently have and statistics from the Department of Justice, there should be a broader spectrum of resources than there currently is. And I think Spark is currently working their absolute hardest to try and, develop this whole evolving process of how do we train professionals to better recognize what stalking is, what goes on as a stalker does, their behaviors. It very much in the way that my manager recognized it before I even did. But then there's this whole question of, how do we bring this information specifically to the broader public, not just professionals? And I think that's a huge question. And I'm really interested in looking into specifically, how do we bring this into a healthcare environment to where, in case somebody cannot receive the legal process that they believe they deserve for a stalker, maybe because the police officer doesn't see the full picture. They see isolated events, which often occurs until it's too late. They see, oh, flowers were left. That's just a romantic thing. There shouldn't be any fear behind that.
Oh my goodness.
It's so nice.
They're so
you
pretty.
Wake up in the morning on your doorstep, there's flowers. But they don't know, perhaps that stalker that this person is dealing with said, when you see a bouquet of flowers on your porch, know that I'm coming for you. Maybe they just don't know the context. And I think Spark is trying to destigmatize that whole aspect of how do we view context and not isolated incidents in order to better understand a stalker, in order to prevent the next stalking.
Well, and especially if the next stalking starts to occur, being able to intervene earlier to where it doesn't escalate to be something, as bad as yours or even worse, to where, because I again, I haven't really had this happen for me, but I can't imagine what it's like to be, you're at work and you're worried about some random guy just showing up, and it's like you don't know what that. It's not like, hey, how's it going? He's some nice guy. You guys are dating, and It's like, oh, I thought I'd take you to lunch. It's like threatening and something that it just and you don't know where it's going to go.
Exactly. And because I was not on the floor, thankfully, I didn't have to experience the physical violence that many survivors have dealt with. But then again, that brings in the whole aspect of how do I meet a stalking criteria? Because from when I talked to a police officer, they told me that I did not fit a stalking case because I had no credible threat of violence against myself, verbally or physically. And so there's a whole pattern of conduct. I know.
I'm sorry. It's just like, well, until you show up with bruises.
Exactly.
It just, okay.
Then they can't really do much. But there's a lot of clauses, especially in California, but I'm sure many other states deal with it as well. I mean, stalking violence in terms of legal code varies from state to state and the exact specifics. But if you do not have, maybe they don't say or text you saying, I'm going to kill you or I'm going to show up and then you're going to get hurt. But maybe there's that, again, it comes in with that context.
Implied threat. Yeah.
Exactly. How do we develop a course of conduct and behavior for this person that they have been displaying? How do we look into that in the context to better develop this person really is at risk, even though they never said, I'm going to kill you?
Wow.
And that's just huge.
Yeah. Well, and that's a tough hill to climb, but it's you're stepping up to make that difference. So are you working within so you're now a nursing student?
Correct.
And are you working within that community too to bring awareness for stalking?
Yes. So I am currently working with a professor that I do work alongside. She's really passionate specifically within the niche of human trafficking. Mm-hmm. But I do realize that human trafficking does relate to stalking as well. Because a lot of the victims that have been trafficked have either been surveyed at one point in their life, or it could be someone that they personally are related to.
Yes.
That traffic them. So I don't think this is specifically only stalking. I think it fits into so many different other categories. But like, how do we, again, stop the behaviors from amplifying? How do we stop it early? And that's really what I'm trying to bring an impact to in some form of way. I'm trying to, within the nursing community, we're taught to deal with survivors of trauma in a trauma-informed lens, to not scare them away, to make them feel heard, seen, valued, and supported. So my whole idea is, how do we bring a diagnostic criteria to where we can say, this is kind of what a stalker looks like? Do we have someone in the emergency department asking for services? Maybe they've had some sort of fear. Maybe we think they're paranoid, so we ask for a psych consult. But is that what they truly need?
Mm-hmm.
Or mental health professionals. They deal with a lot of people dealing with complex trauma. And so is there a way of biting that in the butt before it expands?
Yeah, getting at it before it becomes, before they become a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, wow. Okay. You got quite a story. So, and I do want to, we do want to put notes in things like that and resources. And I want to look at ways that we can continue to support this, because I do think this is a very important thing.
Thank you.
I'm a big believer that I don't think that I think also for the general public, one of the struggles is that if it's uncomfortable, it's not fun to talk about, and so it's just, well, you know what, let's talk about the baseball game. And so these are things that, again, it's kind of like homelessness and all these other things where it's just, at some point you got to go talk about it, and you got to start developing some strategies, and just talking about it is not enough. You got to develop strategies.
Exactly.
Oh, go ahead.
And in order to stop a stalker, it is highly important to name the stalking,
mm-hmm.
to tell someone, I've seen the behaviors you told me about, or I'm seeing it myself, I think what you're experiencing is stalking. And it's really bringing a community in this form of awareness to where they can maybe help a friend, maybe someone, maybe it was their sister
Mm-hmm.
or maybe their brother. You know, you never know who you might impact someday by knowing these behaviors.
Well, and I think, again, I think it's having a name for it, because one of the struggles that I'm sure that you were, because we talked about that a little bit, is just like not having a name and not understanding what the red flags were. They were all there, but they weren't connected to anything. And so it's like kind of you didn't have a place to hook them onto it. Oh, shoot, that's what this is. And it's, you know, I think, again, it's like one of those things where it's, because it's uncomfortable to talk about, oftentimes, you know, nobody's willing to deal with it. So do you have any parting words of wisdom?
I would say on the topic of the discomfort, it is important that we never avoid that form of discomfort to a certain extent. The most powerful thing I've ever heard, and it was actually at a seminar for trafficking at my school, we recognize a lot of these topics and concepts are very difficult for people to deal with. A lot of times there's trigger warnings for people of similar situations, or something, you know, it doesn't feel good. But to sit in that discomfort, to stew a little bit into what it's like to be stalked, it doesn't bring the complexity or the full awareness of what a survivor has dealt with. But at least it brings a greater awareness and a greater capability of understanding their shoes. So always to sit in some form of discomfort is beneficial.
Well, it helps us bring some compassion to the table also, and have some empathy, and, you know, maybe we're going to be more geared towards some sort of solution.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate your time today. This was definitely not a comfortable subject, and I'm okay with that. I think this is going to be a good round. We'll get it out there.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next, the official podcast of the Diablo Valley College Alumni Association, celebrating 75 years of DVC's incredible impact on education, careers, and community. We hope today's episode gave you valuable insights into the journeys of our alumni and the powerful resources available at DVC. Don't forget to join us every Tuesday for inspiring alumni stories, and on Resource Thursdays, where we spotlight DVC's departments and services, showing you how they're shaping student success. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and exploring the connections that make DVC's legacy so special. And remember, DVC Alumni, where every story inspires the next.